Purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass the bill S. 848.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 848, an act to amend the Higher Education Act of 1965 in order to improve the service obligation verification process for TEACH grant recipients and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, and the gentlewoman from Indiana, Ms. Spartz, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members will have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials on S. 848, the Consider Teachers Act.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as they may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of S. 848, the Consider Teachers Act, introduced by Senators Braun and Sinema in the Senate and led by Delegate Holmes Norton and Representative Sparks in the House. High-quality teachers are the backbone of our nation's education system, yet since even before the COVID-19 pandemic, communities across the country, particularly low-income communities, have faced a growing shortage of educators. To address this shortage, the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant Program, or the TEACH Grant Program, offers upfront grant aid to incentivize individuals to pursue teaching and serve low-income communities. Since 2007, these grants have helped people across the country become high-quality teachers in communities where they are needed most. However, administrative issues with the program have inadvertently converted thousands of these grants into loans, which must be paid back with interest. According to an investigative report in 2016, upward of 63% of TEACH grants have been converted to loans, leaving badly needed teachers with burdensome debt. This bipartisan bill we're considering today addresses these issues in 2 ways. First, it implements a reconsideration process to ensure that TEACH grant recipients do not see their grants converted into loans by mistake. And second, the bill creates flexibility so that teachers can still fulfill the grant's requirements in light of school closures and disruptions caused by the pandemic. Simply put, the Consider Teachers Act is a bipartisan legislative fix that will ensure TEACH grants can continue to strengthen and expand our nation's teacher workforce. I urge my colleagues to support the bill and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Indiana.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the Consider Teachers Act. When created, the TEACH grant program was to support students interested in becoming teachers. Unfortunately, the grant program has run into administrative challenges brought in by clerical and paperwork issues. Because of these issues, approximately 2/3 of all TEACH grants are converting into federal student loans. To address this inadvertent error, the Consider Teachers Act reforms this program to ensure that teachers are not indebted due to simple mistakes. First, the legislation gives grant recipients the ability to reverse a conversion and eases the timeline for when the grant recipients must certify their employment with the Department of Education. Second, the bill also extends the time grant recipients have to fulfill their service obligation in response to the challenges posed by the pandemic. The pandemic upended all of our lives, and teachers who lost their jobs should not be unfairly punished for circumstances outside of their control. Mr. Speaker, with the TEACH grant program, the federal government made a commitment to future teachers, and the Consider Teachers Act fulfills the original promise of the program. I urge all members to support this bill. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield such time as she may consume to the gentlelady from the District of Columbia, Ms. Holmes Norton.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank my good friend for yielding. And Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of S. 848, the Consider Teachers Act of 2021. I introduced the companion bill with Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. I would like to thank Senators Mike Braun and Kristen Sinema also for their leadership on this bill, and my good friend Chairman Bobby Scott for bringing this bill to the floor today. This bill would improve the service obligation verification process for the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant Program, or TEACH as it is called. The TEACH grant program was created to attract the best and brightest of the teaching profession in underserved communities. The TEACH grant program provides up to $4,000 a year in grants to students who agree to serve at least 4 years as full-time teachers in a high-need field in a public and private elementary or secondary school that serves low-income families. The obligation to teach 4 years must be completed within an 8-year period. Those who do not fulfill their service requirement will have their grants converted into federal direct unsubsidized Stafford loans, which must be paid back with interest. These loans cannot revert to grants. According to the Office of Management and Budget, 66% of grants are converted into loans. Though 21,000 grant recipients have completed the program without conversion, 94,000 recipients have had their grants converted to loans. Those conversions are often triggered by small paperwork issues, such as submitting the annual form 1 day late or missing a date or signature. In 2018, the U.S. Department of Education released a reconsideration process for recipients who had their grants reverted into loans but had either fulfilled or could have fulfilled their service obligations. The department also turned back the clock to allow teachers who had left the TEACH grant program once their grants were converted to loans to give them more time to complete their service obligations. These changes allowed the department to lift the debt of 2,300 recipients. I am pleased that the department made additional improvements to the program on July 1st, 2021, including opening the reconsideration process to all TEACH grant program recipients. This bill would codify some of these changes, creating a safeguard from changes in department leadership. This bill would also outline yearly deadlines and notification requirements to rectify some of the TEACH grant program's previous administrative mishaps. Furthermore, the onset of the coronavirus pandemic left many recipients with trouble finding qualified work. This bill would create a grace period for those individuals by extending the service obligation fulfillment period by 3 years for anyone who was fulfilling their obligations when the coronavirus pandemic began. This past year has given us all a hard lesson in the invaluable service that teachers and educators provide to our society. As many young students have turned to homeschooling and remote learning, we have all come to appreciate the hard work and incredible talent of our teachers who foster the mental, physical, and emotional growth of our children every day. This bill ensures that pipeline for talent for the teaching profession remains strong and that we do not unduly burden TEACH grant program recipients who have dedicated themselves to serving our most valuable communities. I understand what that means because my own teacher, Beulah Holmes, was a teacher in the D.C. public schools. I strongly urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill. and I yield back.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves, the gentlewoman from Indiana.
I'm ready to close.
The gentlewoman is
I'm
ready
prepared
to
to
close.
close. I'm prepared to close.
Okay, the gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Teach Grant program fails too many of our teachers and needs to be fixed. It's important that our federal government honors its promises. The Consider Teachers Act creates flexibility and streamlines processes. I urge all members to vote in favor of this bill. Strong teachers are essential for high-quality learning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate again my thanks to Representatives Sparks and Delegate Holmes Norton for working across the aisle on this bipartisan priority in the House. As my colleagues have reiterated, the Teach Grants program is supposed to help prepare high-quality, diverse educators for our nation's underserved students. Today, it's critical that the Teach Grant program would actually work as intended as we recover from the global health emergency that cost education jobs, exacerbated achievement gaps, and worsened the teacher shortage in many states and districts. That's why we must ensure that the federal initiatives to strengthen the teacher workforce make it easier, not harder, for individuals to enter the teaching profession. The Consider Teachers Act would help achieve that goal by ensuring that Teach Grants do not have the unintended effect of leading educators with burdensome loans. This simple yet urgent step will allow prospective teachers across the country to continue accessing resources they need to pursue careers in teaching. Importantly, this bill is an opportunity to demonstrate that regardless of party affiliation, each of us in Congress shares a commitment to improving the quality of education by investing in well-prepared teachers. So I urge my colleagues again to support the bill, vote for the Consider Teachers Act, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate Bill 848? Those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. In opinion of the chair, the two-thirds being in the affirmative, the gentleman from Arizona.
I request the ayes and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed.